Right now, in millions of bathrooms all over the world, there are boxes of tampons, pads, and menstrual cups just sitting quietly in drawers. We buy them, we use them, we really don't think twice about it, right? It's just treated as this ordinary, unspoken fact of life. But what if I told you that for literally 99.9% of human history, absolutely none of that existed? Seriously, for over 300,000 years, every single woman who ever lived navigated this exact same biological reality using only what the natural world provided. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into how an everyday drugstore item actually masks a vast, hidden history, one that completely reshapes everything we thought we knew about the female body. All right, let's kick things off with a number that completely blew my mind. 50. Just 50. Anthropologists like Beverly Strassman, who spent time studying the Dogon people of Mali, which is one of the last populations living without modern contraception, made this absolutely groundbreaking discovery. They found that women living in these traditional hunter-gatherer environments experienced roughly 50, maybe up to 100 periods in their entire lifetime. Yeah, that is not a typo. 50.
Now, to put that into perspective, let's look at the modern world. The biological contrast here is just massive. A modern woman living in an industrialized country today, she's going to menstruate roughly 450 times in her lifetime. 450. That is about 40 years of relentless monthly cycles. From her first period around age 12 all the way to menopause around 50, it's just this constant, expected part of life. But for our ancient ancestors, this biological event was actually incredibly rare.
So obviously this brings up the ultimate mystery, right? How exactly did an event that happened maybe 50 times in an entire lifetime turn into a 450-cycle modern reality? How did our biology shift so drastically? And maybe more importantly, what actually happens to a human body when it goes through something nearly 10 times more often than it was ever designed to?
Well, to answer that, let's look at Section 1, the ancient biological cycle.
Okay, so here's what that ancient reproductive loop actually looked like. First off, ancient girls were lean. They were walking miles every single day foraging, which meant their bodies simply didn't have the caloric surplus needed to trigger menstruation early. Because of that, step 1, their very first period didn't even show up until they were around 16 or 17. Now, without modern contraception, step 2 was pregnancy, and that usually happened within a year or two. And as we know, during those 9 months, menstruation hits pause. Then we get to step 3, breastfeeding on demand. And guys, this lasted for 3 to 4 years straight. After weaning, she might have a few months of periods before getting pregnant again, and this whole cycle just repeats, step 4, maybe 5 to 7 times over her life.
Now, the real linchpin here is step 3. Why exactly did breastfeeding stop periods for literally years at a time? Well, it all comes down to a biological condition called lactational amenorrhea. In traditional groups like the Kung people of the Kalahari Desert, mothers nursed on demand. We're talking dozens of times a day. This super intense, continuous nursing produces high levels of a hormone called prolactin. You can think of prolactin as nature's biological pause button. It completely suppresses ovulation. And no ovulation means no period. So for years at a time, their reproductive biology was just naturally put on hold.
All right, moving right along to part 2, culture, rest, and red ochre. So what did they actually do when those rare periods did happen? Well, they just used whatever the land provided. Sphagnum moss was a real game changer here. It's incredibly common, naturally super absorbent, and can hold up to 20 times its own weight in liquid. Women would pack it into strips of animal hide. In drier climates, they'd use dried grass or soft bark fibers. But, ethnographic accounts also show us that a lot of indigenous communities simply wore dark wraps or even just free blood. The crazy thing is, unlike today, there was zero cultural expectation to conceal or hide the blood. It was just a natural, totally visible part of life.
When you lay it all out like this, the differences are pretty stark. Look at the ancestral approach. Entirely natural materials like moss and bark, compared to our modern reliance on manufactured, disposable plastics. Socially, our ancestors treated the cycle as a communal, highly visible time for resting, whereas today it's hidden, culturally unspoken, and let's be real, you're absolutely expected to just keep working through it. And then, of course, the frequency shifted from this super rare thing that happened maybe decades apart to a constant, monthly grind.
And this actually challenges a massive modern misconception. We've all heard of menstrual huts, right? And we kind of just assume it was this awful form of banishment, like women were exiled for being unclean. But the anthropological record paints a totally different picture. Take the Yurok people of Northern California. For them, a menstruating woman was considered to be at the absolute peak of her spiritual power. Seclusion wasn't exile, it was concentration.
Or the Kalasha people of Pakistan. Their communal menstrual house, the Bashali, was basically a retreat. It was a time to laugh, share food, and just take a seriously much-needed break from dawn to dusk labor.
Oh, and it gets even more fascinating when you dig into the archaeology. Across Africa, in sites dating back over 100,000 years, scientists keep finding red ochre, like everywhere, ground into powder, smeared on skin, mixed with fat. Anthropologists Camilla Power and Chris Knight came up with this female cosmetic coalitions hypothesis. They argue that as early humans evolved and lost the visible signs of ovulation that you see in other primates, menstruation became the primary visible marker of reproductive status. So they theorize that women started painting their skin with red ochre as a collective social signal, literally simulating menstrual blood. If they're right, the very first symbolic art in human history wasn't just, art for art's sake. It was a deliberate way to honor and harness the power of menstruation. How wild is that?
Which brings us to part 3, the modern menstrual shift.
So how did we get from natural moss to disposable plastics? Well, looking at this timeline, right up until World War I, women in Europe were pretty much still washing and reusing cloth rags for years. But then, during the war, French nurses working on the front lines noticed something. The highly absorbent cellulose bandages they were using for battlefield wounds absorbed blood way better than any cloth they had. Fast forward to 1920, and the Kimberly-Clark Company takes that exact same wound bandage material and launches Kotex, the very first commercially available disposable pad. Literally within one single generation, menstruation was pushed out of the communal light and hidden away in the shadows of the modern bathroom.
And that sets the stage for our final section, the evolutionary mismatch.
In evolutionary biology, there's this absolutely crucial concept called an evolutionary mismatch. Basically, this happens when our environment or our behaviors change so incredibly fast that our slow-moving human biology just doesn't have time to adapt, so we end up with modern diseases. Think of it like trying to run brand new high-stress software on really ancient hardware. The modern female body is operating in a way it was simply never historically designed to.
And here is the step-by-step biological chain reaction of that mismatch. Because modern women aren't spending decades continuously pregnant or intensely breastfeeding, they experience continuous, monthly ovulation. Now, every single time ovulation happens, it triggers rapid cell division in the ovaries. And in biology, every time a cell divides, there's a tiny little chance for a mutation to occur. So, naturally, radically higher rates of cell division lead to a significantly higher chance of cellular mutation. Researchers directly link this massive jump from 50 to 450 lifetime cycles to the higher rates of ovarian and endometrial cancers we see today, cancers that were virtually non-existent for our hunter-gatherer ancestors.
And this actually illustrates a profound shift in how we might want to view modern medicine. We usually think of the hormonal birth control pill as this totally unnatural intervention, right? But evolutionary biologists point out something fascinating. Because the pill suppresses ovulation, it actually lowers the risk of these specific cancers. It's not just treating a disease, it's accidentally simulating our lost ancestral biology. By stopping the ovaries from cycling every single month, the pill actually mimics the hormonal pause that continuous pregnancy and on-demand breastfeeding used to provide for our ancestors. It's pretty incredible when you step back and think about it.
So that leaves us with one really critical question to chew on. Why do we treat the most ancient, universal process in the female body as some sort of taboo that absolutely must be hidden? For 300,000 years, it was rare, it was brief, and it was deeply integrated into the social and spiritual fabric of everyday life. Women rested. They didn't hide. The expectation of secrecy, the crinkly plastic packaging, and even the physical toll of 450 cycles, these are all entirely modern inventions. It's high time we re-examine not just our history, but how we view our own biology today. Thanks so much